Welcome to the Geekly. My name is Jules.
I'm Leks, and today we are talking about the new Disney film Artemis Fowl and the first episode of season 2 of What We Do in the Shadows. We're going to start with Artemis Fowl, just to give kind of context before we dive into our opinions. As far as ratings go, people have not been happy. IMDb gave it 3.9 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes has it sitting at 10% for the critics and 21% for the audience. Metacritic gave it 31%. Some of the biggest complaints have been that it's cringeworthy, bad acting, boring. Apparently, it's strayed. I haven't read the books, but it strayed a lot from the books. And I read an article in Forbes that basically said this is kind of like a huge 2 hour or an hour and a half prologue to like where the books start. So I know you had some issues with the kid. Do you want to let's start there and talk about Artemis Fowl II himself?
Yeah, I've just got a few things to say first. I think first of all we have to remember this is, I didn't know what it was going into it, but it is definitely a child's film. I think the fact that COVID-19 has made it, Disney have made the decision to not release it in cinemas where presumably only children would see it. They've decided to release it on Disney Plus, and the biggest criticism of Disney Plus so far is that it's absolutely bereft of original content. So the problem is, this film, which would have been seen just by children, is now at the absolute forefront of everybody who's just got Disney Plus's kind of mind. All the big name critics are kind of doing reviews about it. Everybody's thinking it's the first, other than The Mandalorian, the first kind of big Disney original. So I feel like, this is not a good film in any way, shape or form. But I do feel kind of slightly sorry for the kid because this is a career killer. And I feel slightly sorry that it's it's caught the public attention so much in a way that it wouldn't have done if it had just been quietly released for kids into cinemas. But anyway, that's just my 2 cents off the top.
No, I mean I agree with that. Like I have Disney Plus, and pretty much like every week I think, why do I have this again?
Yeah,
Because pretty much the only thing I watch on there is The Mandalorian. I think my mom watched Moana the other day, but essentially, yeah, there's not a lot of new content. Most of the films that are on there, I mean, yeah, they're animated Pixar things, but I've seen them all already. Most of the shows I've seen them all already. There's the World According to Jeff Goldblum, which is pretty good, but it's like 8 episodes, 10 episodes. It's not a huge thing, and the episodes are very short as well. So yeah, there's not a lot of new original content on there, and I think they definitely need to step up, and that fact has contributed to a lot of people jumping on Artemis Fowl and being like, yeah, let's review this. It's a new thing. Oh my god, Disney Plus is put something else out.
yeah. I think I got this. Was it March when it first came out? This is potentially like the third time I've watched Disney Plus. So I agree with you. Like, I don't quite know where the value is at the moment, and I'm looking forward to the MCU stuff. Anyway, this is a story of a pretentious 12-year-old spoilt brat little shit. It's true though, isn't it?
It is true. I mean, I'm laughing because that is pretty much the exact way I phrased it. So yeah, it's. I'm glad I'm not the only one, because sometimes I get like really annoyed with kids. And you're like, oh no, you're being too harsh, or like the Stargirl thing. Everybody's kind of like, Lex, chill.
So anyway, yeah. Story of this kid. He considers Einstein and Hawking contemporaries. We are told he is a genius, probably about 17 times throughout the film, but we are never ever once shown that he is a genius. The whole time I was watching this kid, it kind of reminded me of Bruce Wayne in Gotham.
Yes. Sorry.
No, please. I love people agreeing with me. We are constantly being forced to believe that this child is capable of great feats, and yet every single thing that we are shown tells us otherwise. It's very simple problem solving, and yet we're meant to believe that this kid's a genius. I don't know if you remember, again, it was in Gotham where they were trying to find Thomas Wayne's secret vault or something, and they had this very simple, they looked in a book similar to this, they found the answer. Bruce Wayne was like, my father was a stoic. It was that kind of on the nose, very simple problem solving. This, I'm using little air quotes here, that this genius is able to crack before the adults. That was the kid. The story was his dad was kidnapped. The entirety of Artemis Fowl's the second story takes place in his house. He never leaves his house. And so he is able to kind of orchestrate this whole truly ludicrous series of events where he's of the perception that he has leverage over an army of leprechauns led by Judi Dench, And the truth is, he has nothing. All I have at the end of this film is questions. It's very much, they thought, yeah, let's do this kind of cool thing where this kid, he's smarter than all the adults, which, as Lex knows, is kind of my least favourite trope in all of film and TV. Let's set up a 5-film franchise. Capped off with the fact that he says to Dom, the butler, that they cannot call butler. I'm going to need the suit, Dom. so, so all of these insane shenanigans that this quote-unquote genius gets up to in his own house against an army of fucking leprechauns.
The fairies.
Oh, I thought because it's a leprechaun. Were they not leprechauns?
No, they're fairies.
Okay. So all these stuff that he's getting up to against these fairies, led by Judi Dench, he's solving these very like childish puzzles, and people are saying, "Oh, you must be a genius." He does all of that while wearing a fucking tuxedo and sunglasses. Yeah, I'm gonna yield my time. I'm gonna jump in on any of that.
Yeah, okay. I have many things to say about this film, but I will start by focusing it on the kid, and I'm just gonna kind of, because I didn't actually take notes because I was tweeting on my Lex Watches Stuff thing, which I'm doing on my personal account now, which is at Lexicality, but I will also retweet it on at Geek Nerd Pod. So if you like it, I know a few people are fans of it, which I never expected, but yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I was live tweeting as I was watching this, and just a few things that stuck out to me because I was quite snarky through the whole film. In terms of the kid, yeah, okay, the very first scene with him, he's like sitting there with his therapist, and like I was just thinking, I am going to hate this kid through the entire film. Like it's definitely the stereotype. He's like 12 years old. He's basically a mini Sherlock, and I'm really really tired of the super smart, neuroatypical, aloof genius who notices every tiny detail and can deduct ridiculous amounts of information from that. Like, he sees these tiny pins in this chair and gives this whole history of the chair to his therapist, who's like, in his 50s or something. It's like, this kid's 12. But yeah, it's, again, like you mentioned, the whole like the kid knows more than the adults, and they're treating this 12-year-old like adults are treating this 12-year-old like he's their contemporary. He's fucking 12, which was the problem I had in Gotham as well. You had Gordon asking a 12-year-old Bruce Wayne for detective advice. It was like, come on, what established cop is going to ask a child for advice on an investigation? And this was kind of a very similar thing. He also didn't sound like a kid. Like, there was one line that was just kind of ridiculous. It was like, it's because I'm forced to endure this ridiculous therapy. Like, who the fuck talks like that? I mean, I've spent the past 10 years around academics, and they don't even talk like that.
Can I just jump in on a few points you just made there? If all the adults are seeing this child as their contemporary, he has to be an adult then. You have to commit to that. Because towards the end, when he was kind of talking to the fairy that, I can't remember her name, was it Short or something?
Holly Short.
Holly Short, yeah. He was then trying to be a kid, and we'd already had so much kind of establishment that he was this young Sherlock. All these conversations with people where he was dismissive and a real like arsehole, and like I said, he thought Hawking and Einstein his contemporaries. And now what now? He wants to be a kid. Now he wants to be cool because he fancies this girl probably. It felt very kind of hollow. And again, like you said, he didn't speak like a child, because there was this moment where they were watching the news and everybody was questioning his father's motives, and was he this like grand master thief or something? And his response, he was screaming at the TV, how dare they, and again, that is not how a 12-year-old child speaks. His father's missing, presumed dead, he'd be like crying, he'd be distraught, but he was very much the adult, with Dom beside him. How dare they, as if the reputation of the family is what this 12-year-old fucking child is most concerned about. It was preposterous. It was frequently preposterous.
Definitely. And just to kind of like sidestep a bit, I want to talk about Dom, because he is part of a trope that I find very annoying. And I think particularly right now, when everybody's talking about race, is also a very problematic one. You have various depictions of the other in terms of different races and ethnicities. You know, you have the kind of noble savage, the uncivilized savage who is actually savage, or like the cannibal version of a primitive culture. And then you have this kind of mysterious otherworldly sage type person. And Dom is one of those. He's this giant guy, weird eyes, weird hair, doesn't really say much, except for a few exposition dumps. It's supposedly like some, you know, killer fighter a la Alfred in Gotham, but also very wise and kind of a mentor to Artemis the Second. And yet he also follows Artemis, again like Alfred. And then there's this point where he has this very kind of touching moment with Artemis, and we never actually know where Dom is from, but he throws out some kind of generic African language, and you know, gives the background for it and some sort of symbology, and it's just kind of like he's not an actual character. And you know, so often black people in particular in film are forced into these really confining structures, and they aren't, I mean, I don't think anybody in this film was really given much of a character arc or any sort of dimensionality, but they really didn't try with Dom. He was just kind of like a prop basically. And as soon as we got to that scene and I saw where it was going, it was just like, for fuck's sake, how many tropes are going to be crammed into this film? Which apparently is a lot. There were a lot for 90 minutes. I lost track of how many tropes were in this film.
Speaking of Dom, he actually reminded me most of the character of Mac when they do Lethal Weapon remakes in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. The character he plays, I can't remember which one of the Lethal Weapon duo he plays. The joke is that every single scene Mac is in, he delivers nothing but exposition. And then, you know, Dennis will be like, okay, like we get it. And then he'll keep explaining the situation to the audience. And then Dennis will be like, yeah, like we really get it. Every word out of Dom's mouth was just exposition. There was this one time where he said to Artemis, is there a chance that your father gave you a clue? I mean, you know, like you couldn't help but come out of the film. Like we get it, you know. We know what happened 5 minutes ago. You don't have to kind of keep reminding us. And again, like I have to remind myself, this is like a kid's film. But even so, I think, you know, people underestimate children in every way.
The summary of the film really emphasized the fact that the Fowls were this family of criminal masterminds, which did not get brought up in the film at all. And in fact, because like in the books, Artemis himself is supposed to be like a criminal mastermind, but like he didn't do anything criminal or even remotely villainous in this film. He was very definitely in that trope of special hero kid person. So I found that kind of disappointing, because I was like, oh yeah, this is gonna be cool. Like we very rarely get to see stories from the villain's perspective at all, and we never get to see a villainous child except in like horror movies when they're possessed by some sort of demon. So I thought it was going to be a cool concept, but none of that was actually in the film.
Originally, and this is how long this film apparently has been gestating, I think it was a Miramax property because Harvey Weinstein was involved. You know, when everything happened with him, it became a Disney property. And I watched the trailer for Artemis Fowl first before I watched the film. And there are scenes where Dom and Artemis are not in the house. And there was a scene with this, looks like an angel at one point. And I do wonder sometimes if Disney have washed out all the kind of maybe scarier moments or the more adult themes, so that it's something a bit more generic and a bit more kind of broad for children.
I definitely think so. I mean, as I was watching it, I was just thinking, why does Disney have to do this to fucking everything? Like, kids can handle some darkness. I mean, shit, kids are dark. Like, if you sit and have a conversation with a 4-year-old, the stuff that comes out of their mouth is dark. So yeah, like you said, I think people don't give kids enough credit. They can handle a lot of things. I mean, shit, just look at most fairy tales. They're really disturbing. But just to kind of like go on against this thing about, because apparently they are like setting this up to be a several movie thing. But they've made the same mistake that a lot of studios do when they're planning to make like a trilogy or a series or whatever, and they're banking on the fact that they're going to get subsequent movies. And so the first movie is just kind of setting up the world. when you try to do this, you end up creating a very kind of generic and boring story that nobody wants. It pisses off the established fans, and it just alienates the people new to the franchise because they're like, why the fuck does anybody like this? And I think that's exactly what happened here. Is, you know, they thought, oh, let's create the world and let's get some backstory for Artemis and show how he evolves into this child villain, and all they got was this really boring, kind of ridiculous story that didn't have a plot. Honestly, I would not recommend this film to anyone. I wouldn't even recommend it to children because I feel like it would teach them bad things about storytelling and how you do it. So I would rather show them a good child's film than this one, like Coraline or something. I agree 100% with the ratings. In fact, I think the ratings, particularly Metacritic, were a bit generous. I would probably go with the Rotten Tomatoes 10%.
Do you know what's funny? Before we started recording, I actually looked. It's down to 9%.
Okay.
It's dropped within the space of 2 hours. Don't bother. Just don't bother. That's my advice for everybody. Let's move on to what we do in the shadows. I think for this, it would be best if I say everything I want to say, and then you say everything you want to say, because it's going to be polar opposite. I know that already.
Yeah.
For the record, I thought this was a waste of time, and I was so surprised that you said to me, "Yeah, you know what? Let's review What We Do in the Shadows, Series 2, Episode 1. I was like, Lex, we both know how this is going to go. Let's not bother. But you were insistent, so here we go. Rotten Tomatoes, Season 1 of What We Do in the Shadows, 94 critic score, 95 audience score. Season 2 of What We Do in the Shadows, 100% critic score, 92% audience score. Before I say anything, I've just got to remind everybody that the theme tune to this TV show is superb. Okay, so for those who don't know, the story basically centres around a familiar played by Harvey Guillen, and it's about the life of Guillermo in this house serving 3 totally inept, self-centred vampires. And at the end of last season, he basically realised that he is a descendant of Van Helsing. So the whole show will be about the moral kind of quandary that he finds himself in. Do I kill my abusive master, and presumably the others as well? Or do I continue to serve in hopes of eventually getting turned into a vampire? And Harvey Guillen is absolutely superb. He's the heart of the show, for sure. He's just so nice, and he's constantly belittled, told to do all the bitch jobs around the house, basically shat on by his master and the other 2 as well. Matt Berry plays Laszlo. Laszlo is basically like a dandy. He's very incapable of everything, but Matt Berry is the face of 21st century British sitcom comedy. He is, royalty as far as I'm concerned. He's been in Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, The Mighty Boosh, The IT Crowd, Toast of London, Year of the Rabbit, and it's kind of like Liam Neeson in films. You're getting Matt Berry. He never really changes it up, but Matt Berry puts on this kind of, that's not how he actually speaks, though. He has this performance voice. You'd always get, shadow puppets. You always get weird pronunciations and inclinations, but I just love watching him. Natasha Dimitriou plays Nadia, and I've never personally seen her in anything else, but they're husband and wife, and they are just dynamite together. I really enjoy watching them. Kyvan Novak, Face Jacker, Foam Jacker, Man of 1,000 Voices. He plays Nandor, who is the master of Guillermo. He was part of the Ottoman Empire, and I think he's 700 and something years old. He's the oldest of the group. Their relationship, him and Guillermo, it is, in a sense, it is almost like a married couple as well. Not like a really bad, toxic marriage, but that's the kind of the way they play off each other. You've also got the character of Colin Robinson, played by Mark Proch. He is an energy vampire, and he may even be my favourite of the vampires, because there is something just so... It's hard to explain, but the real vampires, there is a sense that they are kind of wary of him, because he can get very powerful. And so really enjoy all of those, the way they play off each other. The sitcom in general, it's like a kind of surrealist fantasy sitcom. I find it to be a good blend of dry humour, good blend of visual gags. And like any good mockumentary type sitcom, it's less about the kind of funny lines, and it's more about the absurdity of these people's actual life. to them it's all normal, but for us it's absurd, and that's kind of where the comedy comes in. Obviously mixed with their ineptitude. They're all in a sense Michael Scott or David Brent. The problem with episode 1 is that it came out weak. I went to watch 1 episode and I accidentally watched 6. It's very much my type of humour, very much my type of people and characters. Of the 6, I would say episode 1 is I kind of sort of ranked them in my head. I would put it 5th of 6. The problem is they relied on the cameo of Haley Joel Osment. They thought, what a great way to kick off the season. Let's get this kind of, the kid from The Sixth Sense to do this kind of cameo. That was the kind of selling point of this episode. And that was a mistake. You can maybe bury that in like episode 3 or something once you've got a bit of momentum. But this wasn't a strong episode to kick it off. I'm not going to kind of spoil anything, because I think this is generally a non-spoiler we're doing. But if anybody's interested, maybe watch episode 5. I think that's the best one. But Haley Joel Osment was in it. Benedict Wong was in it as well, who's from we saw him in Doctor Strange. In I think episode 2, a new character joins the regular cast, this possessed doll, which is really done well, like fantastic. Really enjoyed that. And yeah, I enjoy it. I find it very funny. There are laugh out loud bits, but it's kind of, I watched the whole way through with just this big grin on my face, and I happened to be watching it on the night my sister was watching some as well. She was a few episodes behind me. My friend Carla, who's a patron of this show, thank you for your patronage, Carla. She was also watching it with her husband, and we were all kind of texting each other about the jokes. And I'm just really thankful that there seems to be a big following behind something that I perceive to be working. Leks might have different opinions, I suspect. I just want them to make sure that they don't get lost in the whole, we've got this big cameo, let's make that the thing, because episode 6 has a gigantic pop culture Mount Rushmore cameo in it, and it's a far better episode. But the only reason this is the first of the season, I think, is because they've thought, let's get the cameo, that's the big selling point. It's kind of a 6 out of 10 episode, but I mean, that's in this day and age, that's not ridiculously bad. I implore anybody to watch it that likes kind of dry comedy, British comedy, Matt Berry, vampires. Now I pass the floor over to Leks.
Wow. That was like 20 minutes. That's okay. Yeah, I agree with you. The opening credits and the theme song are great. They're probably the only good part about the show. I'm actually quite confused because I know this gets good ratings, and I had a few conversations on Twitter because I live tweeted this as well while I was watching it, and apparently I'm not the only one who's confused about why this show is considered funny. From my perspective, there are no actual jokes. They have essentially one gag, which they used throughout season 1 and have continued into season 2, which is essentially that the 3 vampires are completely self-absorbed, incompetent idiots who are unaware of Guillermo and what he's doing entirely, and just give him shit jobs, make fun of him, and ridicule him nonstop. I find it just mean-spirited. I don't understand why that's funny. I don't understand why people like that. As you said, Guillermo's very, like, the actor does a great job. He's a very likable character, the only one with any sort of depth. And so, like, every episode is just these 3 rather unlikable characters shitting on this character that you do like. And it's basically just bullying. And again, I don't find it funny. It's the same thing as why I don't find a lot of British humor funny. I know this is an American show, but this is kind of a thread in a lot of British humor of, let's just insult somebody repeatedly over and over and over again, and that's funny. And then we'll make some fart jokes. And it's like, no, that's just nothing. So, like, in watching this episode, at one point, I at least, they're only 30 minutes or 25 minutes. At some point, I was sitting here watching this and was thinking, do I just misremember the movie completely? Was it like this? Was it this setup? So I went back and, like, through YouTube, watched various clips of it, and was like, no, this is actually kind of brilliant. It's funny. It's entertaining. The characters are, like, interesting people. The humor isn't just. I mean, yeah, they're kind of dumb for vampires. They're not the stereotypical like sophisticated, elegant, mysterious vampire. They're a little bit bumbling, a little bit ridiculous, but it's also very self-deprecating, and they're not just insulting literally the same person for 12 episodes now. I forget how many episodes season 1 had. It might have been funny for like one episode or something to see them kind of overlook and take Guillermo for granted, but as the central point of the show, it's very weak. Haley Joel Osment, I don't know why he was even in the episode. I don't know why he agreed to it. I mean, okay, yeah, he's not been in a lot of things, but he can't be that desperate for work. They could have had anybody do that part, and to be honest, they should have just cut it out, because it was really just a continuation of Guillermo being shat on by everybody else, and arrogant, shitty people getting things they don't actually deserve and being praised for it for being arrogant, shitty people. Essentially, I don't understand why people find this funny. I mean, if you do, great, but if you're one of those people who watches it and just thinks I don't get it, you're not alone.
You know what? I'm not going to actually offer any kind of retort to that, because obviously I have one interpretation, you have another interpretation. My assumption is it's going to be like a Cinderella story at the very end of the day, and so that's the kind of destiny Guillermo will have. I don't know how it'll play out, but I look forward to kind of watching. Let's never review this again.
Yeah, to be honest, I forgot how bad it was. Like, I remember that I didn't really like it.
You loathed it. You absolutely went to town on it, and I was like, "What? He wants to watch this again?"
Well, like, so much time has passed, and we've watched so many things in the interim, and like, I still remember, like, my main memory of What We Do in the Shadows is the film, which I really really enjoy. I was actually thinking like we should do a versus of film versus the TV show. Not that we like watch any more of the TV show, but like maybe rewatch the film and do a comparison of the two.
I think that's an excellent idea.
But I'm definitely not watching any more of this. And the next time I suggest that we review it, like when season 3 comes around, just say no.
I will do. I will say no. Thanks very much for listening. Thanks again to our new patron, Carla. We have a website at geeknerdpod.com, and we will see you. What are we doing next?
At some point this week, probably this weekend, we have a new episode coming out for our patrons where we review Justice League Dark and Justice League Dark Apocalypse War. Then the next episode comes out on the 22nd. We'll be doing Galaxy Quest and Never Surrender, which is the documentary about the making of Galaxy Quest. So that should be a lot of fun. And then, coming up throughout the month, we've got like Twilight Zone premieres, Doom Patrol is back. We'll be doing Dark Season 3. We've got loads of more Patreon content coming up, like Cowboy Bebop, Podcast Away. We've got like a pretty definite schedule for new patron content coming out every couple weeks. We're going to be doing the whole Alien franchise because I love it. So if you're into that, tune in. You can get access to all of our bonus content for as little as $1 a month, and we're at like 20 hours of content at this point. Yeah, and we'll be doing some more versus. I think our next one is going to be Harley Quinn versus Harley Quinn, Suicide Squad, and Birds of Prey, which I'm really looking forward to, because we're going to watch both of them all over again. Even though I know Suicide Squad is supposed to be a shit movie, but it's got like this place in my heart, and I can't explain it.
You should see a doctor. Get that cut out, mate. Sounds bad.
Hey, I was crushed when we didn't get a Jared Leto Joker and Margot Robbie Harley Quinn movie. Like, I was so committed to that, and then it didn't happen, and I'm still grieving.
Don't watch Artemis Fowl.
Yeah, that's the takeaway. Don't watch What We Do in the Shadows.
I'm not even going to say watch What We Do in the Shadows, because it seems everybody already is, and 100% for season 2 on critic score on Rotten Tomatoes I think it speaks for itself. Thanks for listening. See you soon.
Bye.